Hello, it's Blue Orange 22. So tonight I'm bringing a debate that I had last week with a person named Nathan, who's actually he actually found one of my flyers at FAU, and we had a debate about the men's rights movement and feminism. It was courtesy of a Twitch channel, PrimeCayes. Shout out and thank you guys for setting this up. Thank you for having the debate. I'm going to link the channel down below. And anyway, here is me and Nathan.
Thank you for being so kind as to join us, especially last minute, Blue Orange. I don't really know anything about you, but I do appreciate you being so kind. The last
Okay.
guy, you should have seen it. It was less than a minute. He was on camera. He was gone. You identify as a MGTOW?
No, not at all. I identify as a men's rights activist, but most certainly not MGTOW.
Sorry, excuse me. All right. Um,
My name is Blue Orange 22. That's my YouTube tag as well. I am a moderator, admin of the men's rights server. And lately, I've been wanting to be more publicly active. So, Nathan, why don't you share how you found me in the first place?
A friend of mine saw a flyer of his on a college campus and um, sent it over Snapchat. And then I realized when I was looking through your YouTube channel that you debated Sam Cedar and Vlash. So I was like, hey, let's have this guy on.
Fair enough. All right, I'm gonna get myself off screen. You'll still be able to hear me though. So we'll start with introductions. Nathan, and then Blue Orange. Well, no, Blue Orange will have to go first. And then we'll go Nathan. We'll 2 minutes introductions. Then we can have a rebuttal. And after that, we'll just jump into it. All right. So, Blue Orange, give it a crack.
Okay. So I guess I want to start off by explaining what the men's rights movement is not. And there's a lot of misconceptions that we're MGTOW, that we're incels, that we're misogynistic, which is strange considering as among our admin team are women and people who are married with children. So logic doesn't really fly on that one. We're also not a white supremacist group or right-wing group. That's often another thing people mistake, where we have people from all over the world, all different ethnicities, different religions. We have socialists, we have capitalists, we have transhumanists, we have pretty much all points in between. The one unifying aspect of the men's rights movement is pretty simple. We think that there are issues and disparities that affect men and boys that simply aren't being addressed enough. And I know feminism is going to come up, so I'll try and give a 30-second breakdown of my view on feminism. The men's rights movement as a whole is not against the idea of feminism. And in fact, some of our members do identify as both MRAs and feminists. And I did an excellent interview recently with an African university student from Kenya who identifies as both an MRA and a feminist. Excellent, fantastic interview with her. So we're not against the principle of women's rights, and we're not even against the idea of a feminist movement existing. And if I find myself talking to a feminist on social media, I'd say 4 times out of 5, we find out that at least ideologically, we agree on the vast majority of our core values, and 95% of our core values are the same. And then there might be some differences in opinion when it comes to legislation, what's a good idea, who's disadvantaged, is the pay gap real, is so-and-so issue valid or not. But what the ideal world looks like is very often the same. Where we become anti-feminists is very often these more politically minded lobbyist groups. And a lot of people who I feel, a lot of organizations and a lot of individuals who I feel, they're really kind of in it more for the political game. And that's true, I think, for a lot of lobbyist groups, whatever it is, on any side of the spectrum. And it's not to call out all feminist organizations, but a lot of times we meet resistance where, frankly, we really shouldn't. And, is it a difference? Is it an ideological difference? Or is there something nefarious going on? And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Well, I'll say I personally like feminism. Feminism, by definition, is equality among men and women when it comes to the economy, when it comes to politics, when it comes to social, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I like it. I like the idea. I don't really like the ideas behind men's rights activists and the general outcomes that come when people get involved in the movement. I feel like it's a waste of energy for non-issues. I don't think men are really oppressed. And I think that it's almost a distraction and a reaction to feminism being more prevalent. And rather than trying to be willing to see where feminists are coming from, it almost puts men in the position of victims. I just don't like playing victim. But yeah, I mean, I just don't like MRA. So MRA ideas. But yeah.
Okay. What are some male issues? Do you think there are any male issues that the men's rights movement would talk about that you would agree with?
Can you tell me some of these issues? Because I really don't know any issues.
Okay.
For me, I'm a man. I don't really feel oppressed by, or I don't feel like a victim in any sort or any sort of way because of my gender.
I'm assuming you're from the United States.
What happened?
I'm assuming you're from the United States.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll just rattle some off. The education gap, circumcision, the life expectancy gap, the draft, although that's, I think, becoming neutral now. Not that I like any draft, to be honest with you. The way male victims of domestic violence are treated, the sentencing disparity in gender, which is bigger than race. A lot of people don't know that. And I did a video on police shootings and disparities in police shootings. And yes, it is true that Americans of color are significantly more likely to be killed by police than a white American. The gender gap, men overall, when you take all races, are 19 times more likely to be killed by police. And statistically, a white man is significantly more likely to be killed by police than a black woman. Is it fair to say that men do commit more violent crimes? Absolutely. But I just think that's an interesting statistic. When I said the employment gap, I said so go on.
Yeah. So I just wanted to address some of the points that you made there. First of all, I'm circumcised. I don't mind being circumcised. I was thinking about it. If I had a kid, would I get them circumcised? Would I not get them circumcised? I probably would, just because that's what I know.
Let me ask you.
But what do you mean by what's the problem with circumcision? I'm just curious about that.
Okay, well, the most and this is going to get a little R-rated, but the most sensitive erogenous tissue is removed, especially the frenulum, the ridge bands, and thousands of what's called Meissner's tacticles or Meissner's corpuscles, which are fine touch receptors. And if you Google or you go on Wikipedia, does circumcision cause a loss of sexual pleasure? You'll find 10 studies that say yes. You'll find 10 studies that say no. You'll say 10 studies are inconclusive. I mean, there's all different studies coming out, all different kinds of claims. But the reality is, logically, how can you cut off the most sensitive tissue from an organ and then not lose the sensation of that organ? How can you cut off not nerve tissue and then lose the function of that nerve tissue?
Are you circumcised?
I am, yes.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm still able to feel good. Like, I don't want to get too deep into this, but I can still feel good even.
And this is always why this is a very awkward topic, which is one of the reasons why I think, and feminists by and large, I will give credit, do agree with MRAs on this issue. The majority of feminists that I talk to, whether they really care or not, at least they do give lip service to the idea that they do support activism. But I'm going to be honest with you. There are a surprising number of MRAs who agree with you, and I think that I'm not saying you personally. I think psychologically, a lot of men this happened to when they're a baby, and I understand this, are kind of in denial. Like, you don't want to believe something really bad happened to you. I get it. I've gone through bouts of saying, well, it's not that bad. I don't think, because who wants to admit that, right? I mean, it's not a pleasant experience. It's not a pleasant thing to think about.
What were some of the other problems and disparities? Because we can move on.
Yeah, I know this one gets weird. Okay, I was talking about the education.
The first
gap.
Few education gap. So what's the education gap?
Okay, so and I could give international examples, but I'm going to stick with America for just the time being, and then ask me if you'd like to expand internationally. In the United States, boys and men are behind in every facet of education, from primary school to university. Boys get lower grades in every subject at every age. Boys are less likely to graduate high school. boys are less likely to go to college, and yet there are significantly fewer scholarships available for male students. And to make matters even worse, there was a study by a woman actually at the MIT School of Economics, Camille Terrier. I'm a big fan of hers. I've actually spoken to her before, showing that not only do boys get lower grades for in every subject at every age, but boys actually get lower grades for the same work as girls. And they found that when you remove gender and you have blind testing from third-party assessors, that the gender gap disappears. And this study has been replicated overseas as well, where boys are getting lower grades than girls for the same work. And that bleeds into the next issue, which is the employment gap, which is, and this is at this point, honestly, men under 45, because I've been talking about this for 10 years, and back then the stats were like 30 to 35. So this is now men in their 40s and under. Men today are significantly more likely to be unemployed. And it's causing such a problem that women are now having a difficult time finding an economic match to marry. Young women are twice as likely to buy their own home, and young women are now out earning men. And the single biggest reason for this is that now women are the majority of college students, and college degree is a very strong indicator. Not the only indicator. I'm not saying it's everything, but it is a strong indicator and a future predictor of income. And so now that men are less educated, men are performing worse at work and worse in employment. And yet the perception is still on.
I would say that, well, looking at these numbers I'm seeing here, percentage of U.S. population who have completed 4-year college or more from 1940 to 2020. I'm looking at just the raw data here. For many years, obviously men were majority compared to women. Nowadays, it's 36% of the population, of the male population, is college graduates, and 38% are female graduates. So there's really not much of a gap. Yes, there is a disparity, I suppose, but it somewhat makes sense because we held them back from a variety of careers, and only fairly recently, in the grand scheme of things, women are now able to do whatever career they want. So, I mean, I think that there will be gaps, but is there anything like specifically causing the gap or holding men back? I wouldn't say that. Men are still able to go into whatever field that they want to do. They're not being held back in that way. So if men just perform worse, is that like an inherent something's happening against them?
Well, the figure I usually cite is that 56%, 56 to 57, and this is circa 2018, 2019, 56 to 57% of undergraduates are women, and obviously 44 to 43 are men. And the number is actually slightly higher for postgrad.
Is there something that's stopping men, though, from going to college in that situation?
Well, I think you have, I would say 3 factors. First of all, the grading gap. If boys are, the grading bias, if boys are getting lower grades for the same work, obviously they're disadvantaged. Secondly,
what bias?
I told you that study from MIT, right, found that when you control for all factors, boys are given lower grades, right, a lower assessment for identical work.
Really?
I can email it to you if you like.
Sure. Oh, you can just send it on Discord if you want, or drop it in the chat here.
It's you mean the chat on right here on this?
Yeah, on here. That's fine.
It is. I will say it is 62 pages long, and it is a little bit math intensive, but the first few pages summarize it rather well. Here we go. Then, if you'd like a European study, it's a shorter, easier to read article. But essentially, this did a very good job of cutting through all possible controls, and found that by the end, there's an unexplainable 6 to 7% discrepancy that can only be explained by a gender bias. And if this was like coming from Breitbart, I would say, okay, it's, but this is the MIT School of Economics. They're pretty good with numbers there.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just, let me open.
I'd also say, and this is something that we get quite a lot on our Discord. I actually emailed a 19-year-old girl about, she'd obviously just finished high school, and she said that there's a lot of hostility towards boys. Like there's a lot of boys are bad. coming from both
I
other
don't know
schools.
about that, my guy. Wait,
That's, you get,
from schools, like from teachers or something?
yeah. And if you browse the men's rights Discord, these kinds of stories, and I know you say it's just an anecdote, but when you start hearing similar anecdotes over and over and over again, I mean, there's something to that, maybe. She's actually just started college, and I've asked her to pay attention to what's going on at college and to do an interview around New Year's. So I'm gonna do that.
What exact? Wait. I'm sorry. I really want to get into that culture thing because I remember on the Majority Report you mentioned like something around the lines of young boys are emailing you saying that their schools are teaching them. Well, what were they being taught? That men are bad or something like that?
Just in general, just that they get a lot of hostility and they feel like they can't talk to their parents about it or else they get shouted down. They can't challenge a teacher or else they'll be shouted down. They just kind of feel like they have to be quiet about it. And so where do they pop up? They pop up on Discord. They pop up on men's rights subreddits. And then
So
then they see the media writing articles saying, "Oh, your young men are being lured into the alt-right." No, your young boys are being chased into the alt-right. Lured into the
I
alt-right.
would not say that, but we how you're not that old. We both go to the same college, so I'm
And
assuming we
just so you
went to
know,
fairly similar.
I need to clarify something right now. Sorry. We are not alt-right. I know that I
Yeah.
just said that
Okay,
because
okay.
yeah, we're not.
So, yeah, we were probably in around similar schools. We're both in a liberal area of Florida. Um, I've had teachers, men, women, that I haven't liked or disagreed with, and I've disagreed with them about something in class, and I wouldn't say that I was like held back or targeted for being male. Do you have any experiences where you felt that in like K through 12 education or even in college education that your status as a male was holding you back or like preventing you from disagreeing with the teacher?
I went to Catholic school, and I have to say, I got very lucky with my high school. I actually think I had very good high school teachers, and for the most part, their stupid rules were enforced pretty fairly. So me personally, no, I'd say I got pretty lucky with my education in that extent. I remember there was this one Spanish, she was a nice lady. There was this one teacher at some point through kindergarten to eighth grade, I won't say when, where she would obviously punish the boys more severely than the girls, but that's,
I really don't know. Like, I can't really verify that. I understand that might be true. Um, but
And
if
I mean,
if we're
I
going
was kind of
like
joking, but
if we're
that's
gonna
not
go
a
off
big deal.
like if we're gonna go off like the anecdotes of people that are talking on your Discord on the Discord server or the Reddit, I can say that in an area where I assume that many of the teachers would probably be self-proclaimed feminists, even the ones I disagree with, I never really felt uh anything preventing me from talking about my disagreements. But as for like the education gap, so I want to talk more about like the broadly things rather than anecdotes.
Okay.
Um, so do you feel, I'm just gonna be honest with you. I am willing to take my L here. I did not prepare for an MRA discussion, but so I don't know all your information or all your stats, but like I want to know if there's anything like really systematic that we have to target that that has to be like anything that's like immediate that has to be done that is like really holding men back. Like I understand that there's some gaps, but I think a lot of the gaps are pretty normal. I think that the uh, disparity in education honestly isn't that big in the grand scheme of things, especially when you look at the current graduates. I understand that there's more women in college right now, but there's also more women in this country. We've held women back for many years. So, like, what needs to be done on a policy level that needs to be changed right now to help men?
Okay,
And
just to
also,
answer.
I do want to talk about like some of the other points you make in your whole like list of things because some of that stuff was actually really interesting.
Okay.
But yeah, I want to talk about like what potential policies are first.
Okay. Just to answer two quick things. You say that there are more women in this country, and that's true, but that gap really starts to widen after the age of 50. I mean, there's a very slight difference in the late teens and early 20s, but that's a fractional difference. And then when you say we've been holding women back for a long time, that's true, but a college student who's 19 years old today is 19 years old today. They weren't a college student in 1932.
That's
So
why
those
that's why we see a rise in the numbers is because they're not being held back like the students were in 1932.
Right, but then shouldn't they have equalized rather than surpassed men?
I don't think you'll ever get in a situation where, let's say, we try our hardest to be egalitarian in every aspect on race, on everything, on men and women, where we're ever going to have 50% or completely equal. Let's say, like, there's uh, Asians, Hispanics, white people, black people, all the people. You're never going to get 25, 25, 25, 25,
Sure,
you know?
sure.
So I don't think that some gaps are necessarily something that's bad.
If you want to go back, would you agree that during the late 60s and early 70s, one advantage, and there were no doubt disadvantages that a female student might face, but one major advantage a female student enjoyed was exemption from the Vietnam draft?
Yeah, I think that a feminist would be against the draft being gendered,
Oh, I
and I
agree.
agree with
I
that.
mean, yeah,
Yeah, I agree
I
with
give
that. We're not
feminists
gonna
credit
have
for that.
a yeah.
Yeah, no, I give feminists credit for that. I just think it's interesting, Hillary Clinton talks about her disadvantage as being a woman, but if she was
I'm
a
generally
man,
against the draft in general.
yeah,
Yeah.
were she to have been born male, she might not have reached her 21st birthday. So, but no, I do give feminists
Yeah.
credit. I do give, I do. Actually, I'm part of the National Coalition for Men, and we recently did a lawsuit to the Supreme Court, and the national, the National Organization for Women actually joined us, the ACLU, kind of aligned with us on that one.
So I agree with your position though that like draft should generally be equal if just not existing, but
I would
I
say,
don't really
honestly,
see a situation where we're gonna see a moment where there's gonna be a draft. We,
I don't know.
in this century, we've had two front wars in two different areas across the ocean, and we didn't need a draft there. I don't think we're ever gonna be in a position where we need a draft again. So
I don't know, man.
that's one of my
She
problems
scares me.
with the what?
She really scares me.
We're not gonna go to war with China.
I don't know.
we're
I
too
think he's.
we're too economically dependent.
I think it may not be our decision. I think he's a true blue psychopath, and I think he might do something crazy. I hope not. But
I genuinely don't know. I don't think he's.
Let's try.
I
to
think
stay
he's
focused.
a bad guy.
Let's try to stay focused.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Yeah, so in general, like this is one of my big things with like the MRI thing, right? So you'll get like people talking about like the draft and fine, sure. But it's one of those issues where it's not a big issue, so it feels like a distraction from much more major issues and even issues that would affect both men and women, but probably men in a greater disparity. So, I mean, with the draft, sure, we're in agreement. Either no draft or equal draft.
no
So,
draft is better.
no draft is better, yes. Well, some of the other points you made. Can you go to that list that you made or that you said in originally?
Okay, well, the next thing I was basically talking about was how the education gap bleeds into, and I'm gonna have to get up in a minute because my cat's a cat. That how the education gap bleeds into the employment gap, where young men, and when I say young, now that really means anything under 45, are falling behind. Young women are now making more than their young male counterparts. I shouldn't say counterparts, I should say peers, when entering the workforce. Men are less likely to buy a car. Men are less likely to be homeowners. Men are more likely to be homeless. Men are more likely to be in prison. And while it's true that some of those things are because of their own faults, violent crimes, drug use, alcoholism, not going to college, how much, since feminists prescribe to the theory of toxic masculinity, how much can toxic masculinity maybe be prescribed to those problems? And to what extent is the reason why men are more likely to fall into those cycles is because of society treats them a certain way? And I mean, I know this is, I know you'll disagree with this. I know feminists hate this. I do think there are some innate psychological and biological differences between men and women. And it doesn't mean black and white, women are like this, men are like this. It means if you took 1 million men and 1 million women in identical circumstances and you track them over 10 years, you might see some trends and patterns emerge. And there's no question about it that men, because of testosterone, are more likely to commit violent crimes. Even some MRAs hate it when I say that, but it's just obvious. But men today in the United States, in the younger generations, we're struggling more than women. We're not getting as many jobs. We're not getting paid as much. We're more likely to be on the streets. We're more likely to be arrested. COVID kind of equalized it a little bit. So stats from 2019, 2020, 2021 are a little bit fuzzy. But if you go by, let's say, just the 2010s in general, starting in 2010,
Yeah.
and I
So
think, yeah,
So I would say that, of course, there are inequalities in certain crimes or punishment or people doing the crime or whatever. That's true. But in the same way, like males are more likely to be murder victims or be involved in drug-related victims of drug-related deaths or gang-related homicides, women are more likely to be victims of domestic abuse and sex-related homicides. So there is some disparities in these different things. But I would say that when it comes to like the broader economic topic, when you talk about like men struggling, like men are less likely to own a home, men are less likely to, what were some of the other things besides home ownership?
less likely to own a car.
Less likely to own a car.
Young men are
Uh,
now earning less than women,
less than
especially in
women.
big cities.
So I would say that the reason why I would assume the reason why many young men are earning less is because many women are just excelling in school. That's one of the big reasons.
Right. No,
There's the
exactly.
education gap, and I think the education gap is somewhat natural. I would say that like
Why would you
when we
say, just
discuss
curious,
these things,
why would
when
you
we
say it's
discuss
natural?
these, because there's more women attending college,
Right, but why do you think that is?
because
Why do you
we
think more
removed a
women
lot
attend
of
college?
barriers from them entering college.
Right, but if the barriers are removed and now it's equal, then wouldn't it be equal instead of women going ahead of men? Like, wouldn't it have just
No,
equalized?
I don't think there would be like I don't think if we remove barriers from anything there would be an equal for anything. Like if we're expecting like 50-50, I think that's idealistic. We're not going to get a 50-50. Even there's
Do you
always
think
going to
that
be like some sort of disparity, even if it's like 51-49 or whether it's 60-40, it's still going to be a thing. But
60 to
I
40,
think one
51,
of the big
49 I
things
could
that we should
accept, but
be
60-40 would be a little, I don't know.
I'm not sure
Right
with
now we're
that.
right now we're
But
at
I think when we
57-43.
look at these issues, a lot of these issues are very valid and important to look at that. But we got to look at also solutions. And I think that everybody right now in America, not just men, not just women, are in a tough place. And I would say that the solution would be broad domestic policy that helps both genders. And I think that when people just kind of focus and divide uh, Americans on men and women when looking at these issues, it's not really that useful. So when people are like talking like, oh, there's this men problem, this men problem, this men problem, this economic problem, many women are also facing economic problems. 50% of workers make under $35,000 a year when the economy was considered booming back in 2019. So those numbers, hearing them about men, don't surprise me. But I would say that we should, when looking at what we can do to make those numbers less or make people's lives better, we should focus on policies that are broad,
I
and we
agree.
should focus our energy on that.
Okay, so let me ask you. This is something I've written about and did videos on. Joe Biden did a stimulus package called the Restaurant Relief Bill, and it was for restaurants that closed down because of COVID-19, had to shut down, and it was to give them money to get back on their feet and to reopen the restaurant, and obviously get their business back. But the bill was written in such a way that, and I hate to bring race into it, but I can't be honest about what it was without bringing race into it. A white male business owner, a white male restaurant owner, was put at the back of the line. And this was done through the SBA, the Small Business Association. And by the time it was done, they essentially claimed that they ran out of grants right at the time they reached the point in line where there was where the white male where the white men were. Excuse me. And to that I say two things. First of all, that's obviously discrimination because if you're shut down, you're shut down. So you might say a white male is advantaged, but being shut down is being shut down. There's no such thing as being advantagedly shut down. And the second thing I would say to that is think about the employees. Because even if the owner is a white man, how many of the servers and cooks and busboys and hostesses, whatever, were women or men of color?
Do
And
you have anywhere like I can read about that?
oh
It's that you
yeah,
said restaurant coronavirus relief.
Yeah, I mean the actual bill is 1,700 pages long, so I did a video where I highlighted the pages, if that's easier. I mean,
Um,
what I do when I go to bills like that, I do Control F. I do Control F women, Control F men, Control F whatever to find it. But I actually did read all 1,700 pages. God, it was fucking exhausting.
cause
Um,
okay, well, I see this local article here. It says women, veteran, and minority restaurant owners lose COVID-19 relief money.
okay.
A
No,
federal relief program designed to help women, minority, and veteran restaurant owners survive the pandemic has backfired on them. It's really rough. We've been doing what we can to keep the business open. We cut the staff down to just me, my business partner, the head chef, and one cook. With her paycheck protection program money spent, she applied for the restaurant revitalization fund and was awarded $89,000. She considered it a godsend that would help keep the drinks flowing at the Seattle pub, as they have for the past 40 years. Um,
yeah,
yeah,
no.
I'll keep reading this article.
I'm gonna send you a link. This is basically that the lawsuit from a white male business owner who sued. Um, that article is kind of framed in a very disingenuous way. It's saying that, well, now that because white men have sued and they did win the initial lawsuit, that now women are losing the grants. And the lawsuit wasn't that women shouldn't get it, it was just that men should get it too. So I find, I don't know if that was the same story, but if it is, I find that headline to be very disingenuous.
I'm looking into it.
So
I don't know if this program was specifically for these groups as mentioned, or like that were being mentioned. I'm not sure.
I
But
know I
okay,
haven't,
sure. I'll give you that there was a disparity in that policy.
so that's just, you know,
But
that's
that
just
but does that
an
really
example.
represent like a systematic uh big time oppression of men, or something that's really holding us back?
If you're a man who supports his family with his restaurant, I would say, yeah, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, sure, but like in
I
general,
mean,
is
not for
like
you
the
and me.
system really holding men back right now? I want to know, like, are men being prevented from succeeding?
I mean, those men were.
I think that you can like there are examples of like, oh, there's like a law that's a little unequal
Yeah, I get what
in
you.
this way or that way, but like I really want to know, like, is there anything really comparable to what women had to go through that men are currently going through?
I mean, I would say that what men had to go through was comparable to what women had to go through. I mean, if you go back to medieval Europe, I mean, the life of the average man, you would almost certainly at some point be conscripted into a war, and war back then was absolutely no fun. So people talk about how bad life was for women back then. I agree, but the male peasant wasn't exactly partying in Cabo either. But
I
in
know,
terms
but
of
like in the
today,
modern times,
modern times, okay. So
yes,
I,
like
I
in more
think,
modern history, more recent history, like during this country's history, women weren't allowed to vote. They had to fight to vote. We gave them the right to vote, but even then, there were still these very big barriers that they still had to get through.
I mean, did you see Hacksaw Ridge? No, not Hacksaw Ridge. What's it called? Free State of Jones movie.
No, I'm sorry, there was a bit of lag there.
Okay,
What
sorry.
you say?
Did you see the movie Free State of Jones, Matthew McConaughey?
I have not seen the movie Free State of Jones.
Okay, it was about a bunch of Confederate soldiers who rebelled against whatever. Point is, the opening scene has been lauded by historians as being very, very accurate, and it was a battle in the Civil War. In that battle, a boy of about 15 or 16 essentially bleeds to death in Matthew McConaughey's hand, and it's a very gruesome look at the battle. And we talk about these challenges that women had, and yes, that's true.
So
But
wait, that
millions,
movie's about like the Civil War, and
yes,
the men were drafted.
right. And
Yeah,
Civil
so
War,
I
World War
think
II, World War One, Korea, Revolutionary War, War of
I think
1812. I don't think you can discount the draft when
I
talking about
think that
historical
yeah, yeah,
figures.
sure. I think that stuff like that is a direct response, direct uh, action or direct result of patriarchy and the thinking that comes with that. So like the idea that like
That's not going to
men
bring him
have to
back.
hmm?
That's not going to bring him back from the dead.
What do you mean?
Maybe patriarchy or not, but that's not going to help him. Still dead at 18, 19, 20.
Yeah, but I think that's literally a result of men making the decision to limit women from going to war, you know, or limit women from the draft. The idea that women aren't strong enough to do that, or women shouldn't be the ones fighting, or women should stay in the house and take care of the kids, or whatever the reason might be.
Sure, I don't disagree.
If we want to make situations where women can also die in the hands of Matthew McConaughey, then we need to be pro-feminism, in my opinion, and
I'm
not
sure
see
there are
women
women
as
that
inherently
would like that
weaker.
too.
Yeah.
But to get back to your point, do I think there are systemic issues holding back men today? I would say the systemic misandry of today is the fact that that restaurant relief bill even conceived of in the first place. So yes, it's a one small slice, but the fact that people can accept discrimination against men, and they can accept all these little pieces, it's the mindset that the idea of misandry is absurd. The idea that men are inherently privileged is the systemic disadvantage. We have a way of thinking and we have these preconceived notions about gender where we have a very difficult time accepting the fact that discrimination against men exists and that men and boys may be even disadvantaged in certain areas. And so to say, is there one systemic system, are congressmen and senators meeting in the back room talking about how can we disadvantage men? No, that doesn't exist. But it's more complicated than that. I think we have these social norms, like you said, patriarchy, and that very well may be part of it. But I think we have a society that doesn't look at men's issues as being serious because our brains kind of lagged a couple generations. And we think, oh, men are still privileged because they're still thinking about the tropes and the conditions that their grandparents talked about. Women staying at home, men going to work. When 40, 50, 60 years later, that's history. But we still had that in our mind. So
I don't consider something history when people living right now had to go through that, and I think that many sexist attitudes can still exist. I just really struggle and want to know, like,
I do.
You mentioned.
Take 30 seconds. Sorry, I gotta take just 30 seconds. I'll be right back.
Okay. We'll wait on that to happen. Yeah. And again, we thank.
How you doing, Prime?
Doing all right. We're trying our best out here.
I'm tired.
Are you already tired?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I want to clarify because some people were wondering in chat. I really didn't plan to do this debate with them. The debate was canceled beforehand with the MRA, but and I did a lot of research on the libertarian stuff, so that's what's on mine. But
I'm trying to see if I can get you someone to come on for libertarian to do it. So afterwards, would you be up for that?
Yeah.
If you're saying you're tired.
Yeah, 100%. I don't sleep.
Okay, great. Yeah, hopefully we can grab this other person.
I'll be much more fit for that.
Yeah. But yeah, so we're just waiting on Blue Orange to take care of his cat, but it sounds like he'll be here soon. There
Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you for being for being here anyway. So continue on.
Yeah. Where did I leave off?
I'm actually,
yeah. I
if I
think
can take
right now. Oh, sorry.
Do just a quick
go ahead.
detour. Maybe I'll post an image to the chat of what my flyer was. Maybe we can post it to the Discord.
Maybe.
I'm just curious. So what?
Yeah.
You don't want to.
Okay.
That's fine. You don't want to, that's fine. But I'm just curious. What was the conversation like? What was the feedback from some of the students? Did you hear anything? Are people talking about it? What was the reaction? Was there one, or because you were the only email?
Well,
honest,
I'll be honest with you.
I'm a big boy. I can take it.
So, me and my friend just sent a picture. I wasn't there. I was at home. And
are you attending FAU? Are you attending the college? Okay.
I'm attending, but I'm online. Okay. But there were some students. I didn't hear anybody talk about it, but I saw some students write on it. I think somebody wrote, that sounds like some incel shit to me. So I'm just gonna be honest. The response doesn't seem the best. Okay. I don't mean to put you down or anything like that.
No. Listen. Give it how it is. It's how it is. It's interesting. Yeah. I kind of want to pivot on what you just said about how that seems like some incel shit. I did a video 4 hours ago on this subject. Um, I really don't like how the word incel is sometimes used. And I, first of all, completely recognize there is a problem with more radical and extreme incels. No question about it. Don't deny it whatsoever. But I find that the word incel has kind of lost meaning because it's thrown out so easily now that it almost becomes someone I don't agree with or an idea I don't agree with. And incel means involuntary celibate. So it's a man who is unable, usually a man, but a person who
Yeah.
is unable to find a partner or a dating life. My flyers talked about things like education. What in the world does boys' education have to do with dating life? Why would someone talking about the boys' education gap, whether you agree with it or not, imply that they're an incel or not? There's absolutely no connection between those two things. And I've seen in debates now that incel is thrown out so easily and so quickly that it's just if you talk about men's rights or you say anything critical about feminism, sometimes things that have nothing to do with gender at all, people just use incel as if it's just some generic insult. And that's something I really don't like. And I also don't like how it's just so generalizing about a person. When someone says, oh, you're a Trump supporter or you're a feminist, I bet I can imagine what you look like. That's
Uh-huh.
completely ridiculous because you'd be amazed at how many people are on the completely opposite end of the spectrum as you, but they'd be 98% similar personality, lifestyle, core values. So to say that you know someone because of a label is just absurd. And the last thing I don't like about the way incel is used as an insult is kind of so what? I mean, it's really kind of, and if it's like the toxic kind, then I get it. But if it's just a man who can't find a girlfriend, why should that be used as a source of
Uh,
shame? If you think
so
about it,
I think when
it's almost like
people
reverse slut shaming.
yeah,
Think
I
about
think
it.
when people use the term incel, they're not really using it to say like a person that struggles to get women. You know, they're using it to describe someone who would self-describe as a self-described incel.
Okay.
And those people, I wouldn't say have the best reputation.
Oh, I agree. I agree. And
And
I am not, by
reasonably
the way.
so.
But I always
And
say,
yeah, I
I always,
I think even if like even though like maybe like you're not like an incel, I think that a lot of people within the men's rights movement and like the men's rights movement in general are pretty intertwined with the incel groups as well. So it really doesn't have the best reputation. Oh, are you there?
He is not. Oh no, and he is
Oh,
there. Your eyes are blinking. Blue orange. Can you hear us?
oh, he's in the rating room.
Oh, I see. Okay, let's pull him back in.
are we fixed?
Gotcha.
Yeah, we're fixed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That
So
that was
I
my,
was just saying before you got like disconnected. Um, a lot of times the men's rights activists and self-described MRAs are pretty intertwined with incels. So I mean that's generally the reputation that people have. And also I think
again,
in general, like I think people really share like my position on like the whole like men's rights movement in general. I think that there's a lot of issues with the world. There's poverty and when we focus on like like in the same like in 1 hour like we'll be talking about like abortion and Roe v. Wade essentially getting banned in Texas or something.
not gonna last.
Um and then we're gonna be talking about like some like toxic masculinity being like a problem, like in the sense that like men's rights activists don't like being called toxic like masculine or something like that. I would like to talk about that term because I feel like I've heard you use that term in your discussion with like Sam Cedar and Vosh, and I think we have different understandings of the word. So
Okay.
could you like describe your problem with the idea of toxic masculinity?
Okay. Just really fast, I do want to go back what you said about incels and MRAs are intertwined. In our Discord, which you're all invited to anytime, we do allow disagreements. Again, I mean, the vast majority of us are not incels, and we have members who are married with children, who are dating. Oh, so yeah, just put that out there. My problem with I don't like how feminists feel that they get to be the ones who define what toxic masculinity is and then lecture a man about it. Because a feminist would rightly so say that it's not a man's place to explain the female experience to a woman, and that's totally valid. So I don't like how the modern day feminist movement has kind of hijacked the term and they kind of use it as a tool to say, oh no, we're the ones who are really fighting for men's rights. Don't listen to MRAs because they don't understand toxic masculinity. Meanwhile, you get some feminist organizations, not all, supporting things like the Duluth model, which is a domestic violence model which teaches that domestic violence is inherently gendered, or supporting things like a homeless housing policy. This is going to the UK, where female homeless citizens are automatically given preference over men. You can't tell me that it's toxic masculinity that men aren't allowed to express themselves, but then whenever I do express myself, you call me an incel. Not you personally, but that's,
Yeah.
So feminists say that part of toxic masculinity is men not being allowed to express themselves. Me being an MRA is me expressing myself, and then I'm shot down for it. If you really believe that men should be able to express themselves, then you shouldn't have a problem with the men's rights movement existing in the first place. So I don't necessarily disagree with the concept, even though I think it's a very kind of loosey-goosey abstract term, but I definitely don't like how it's wielded, sometimes in a very detrimental way.
So I think generally when people are discussing toxic masculinity, they're like talking about things that negatively affect men. So like if someone's like telling you, if you're like feeling down and you're crying about something and someone's telling you to be a man, or someone's you mentioned earlier that you don't like how the term incel is used because the term by definition is involuntary celibate, so it almost feels like slut shaming. That was your words.
Yes.
So that's emasculation. That's also a result of toxic masculinity. So there's a ton of ways that toxic masculinity hurts men, and I think a lot of feminists and the people that even bring it up are more than willing to, or they're working towards trying to make it less present. And when I see people push back against the idea of discussing toxic masculinity as it is, that just seems like counterproductive. And it seems like most cases it's just a reaction, you know? Someone will say like, oh, toxic masculinity is a problem. And then people will interpret that as someone saying, oh, so I'm toxic because I'm a man or something like that. But yeah, the point being, like, if we want to deal with the issues, so emasculation, violence against men, we should all be feminist and work towards getting rid of toxic masculinity.
Well, if I go back to the UK, in 2020 there was a debate about the domestic abuse bill, and I'm sorry for this is a kind of unfair because I know you're not familiar with the UK, but it's similar to a trend that happens in the US. There was the 2020 domestic abuse bill was being debated in Parliament, and several prominent feminist groups and prominent politicians, MPs, members of Parliament, were pushing for a gendered version of the bill. They didn't like how the bill was gender neutral. They didn't like how men and boys were afforded equal wording and protection in the bill. And they were calling for a gendered bill that recognized the gendered nature of domestic violence. And they said, this isn't about excluding men and boys. This is just about recognizing the reality. But it's like, wait a minute, you say it's not about excluding men and boys, but that's exactly what it does.
So wait, what exactly would the bill do? Would it like prevent like people from getting arrested for doing domestic violence against men and boys?
So essentially, it was an indirect way of doing just that. It was structured in such a way that domestic violence against men wasn't legal, it just wasn't legally recognized. And so if the police officer shows up, he would have to find another offense to arrest the man for. And this is something I debated with Vaush, and he made the point that the bill was defeated, and that was his big aha moment. But the problem with that is this has been going on in the UK for a very long time, de facto. So it's de facto versus de jure. Yes, the bill was defeated, but this has been happening in practice for a very long time. And the fact that it was even attempted in the first place is pretty scary. So no, Vaush said I was lying when I said feminists were trying to legalize domestic violence against men. In a vacuum, he's right. Yes, feminists are not, I should say, no, feminists are not trying to legalize domestic violence against men. It's more subtle than that, though. They're trying to write the code in such a way, they're trying to language the bill in such a way that a man would have a very difficult time getting adequate legal recognition. So if a police officer shows up to the house and the man claims that he was beaten by his wife, that his wife was abusing him, whatever, emotionally, physically, whatever, he wouldn't be able to arrest her for domestic violence. Now, he would be able to arrest her, let's say, if a knife was sticking out of his arm. He'd be able to arrest her for assault, but he wouldn't be able to use domestic violence as the basis for arrest. Had that bill been passed, which thank God it wasn't, a MRA politician, the only openly MRA politician in the world, his name is Philip Davies, was instrumental in fighting against it. But what was notable to me was that the 7 feminist organizations, and if you ask me to name them, I simply don't remember them all. I know it was one, refuge is one.
So the
When they
point I want to bring up,
when they were looking
the
to
point I want to bring up though.
the bill.
Wait, I want to talk specifically about domestic abuse.
Let me finish the story, and then you'll get right in.
Sure.
So when these 7 organizations came together to lobby and advise Parliament on the language of the bill, they didn't include a single study or statistic that included male victims. So the only statistics and resources they provided to Parliament when advising them on how to write this bill was completely women only. And you can debate whether male victims are roughly equal or minority, but you wouldn't say like, well, gay people are a minority of the country, so therefore they don't get these tax cuts, right? So you wouldn't say that because men, even though they're a minority of victims, let's just leave them out. Studies show that they may not be such a minority.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be real with you. I cannot speak to the British. I don't like the British. I'm just kidding. But when it comes to just like the issues, like crimes committed against men and women, you brought up like males are likely to be murder victims, for example. I have the numbers in front of me. 76% of murder victims are males. But when it comes to there are multiple crimes where women are specifically affected, and one of those crimes is domestic abuse, 63.7%, and sex-related homicides are 81.7% for women. So, I mean, I can't speak to the British. I don't want domestic abuse to not be addressed for men, so I guess we'll be in agreement that that bill should have been defeated.
And I'm in agreement with you. I mean, absolutely that rape and sexual assault affects women more. It does affect men too, but I would agree. Of course, that's something women have to worry about for sure.
But when we talk about like the disparities in law, so for example, the United States, which is the global hegemon, the richest country in the world, and a huge. Are you good?
Yeah, I gotta plug something in for a second.
No problem. Yeah, so when we talk about, somebody said in chat, men don't report domestic abuse because it's embarrassing to them. That's a direct result of toxic masculinity, my friend, and they should be reporting domestic abuse. Yeah. Fuck, where did I leave off? Yeah, when looking at America, when we look at like laws specifically affecting men and women, so recently there was the Texas bill that is trying to prevent women from having an abortion, even though there's it's the constitutional precedent is pushing or allows abortion. It's constitutional. And the Texas bill is trying to push against it. And it's obviously not just Texas where this is happening. Ron DeSantis in Florida is looking into a similar bill. And obviously the right wing, the entire like 50% of our politics, the Republican Party, is trying to prevent women from having the right to choose. This isn't even like some hidden thing that we have to speculate on. This is like the policy platform of the Republican Party. So if we're going to be talking about like bills and legislation specifically affecting men and women, we can look at things like the abortion bill. We can look at sorry, let me just close that.
Well, let me just say, as
the abortion bill, for example, if we want to look at specific policies.
Okay, well, let me just say, first of all, as a Republican, I am pro-choice. I definitely do not think most Republicans want to ban abortion. I think most Republicans around the country are very angry with Texas because it's a very bad look, and all it's going to do is flip Texas blue. There's no way this law lasts. People are criticizing the Supreme Court for not seeing the case, but the thing is, the Supreme Court, typically their precedence is they wait for the state to appeal first, the lawsuit to the state court, then they take it. So I think there's no chance this bill lasts. I don't think Americans want abortion to be outlawed. Yeah, the religious right does exist, but that's a shrinking minority. Every day you wake up, that minority is a little bit smaller than the day before, and that trend's not going to change, in my opinion. Um, so I don't think the abortion bill law, I should say, it's not it passed, so it's not a bill. I don't think that law holds up very long, and I don't think abortion is ever banned in the U.S. Short of a World War IV, alien invasion, catastrophic events. I don't see the U.S. government ever banning abortion. So, I mean, think about it. 2016 to 2018.
I really don't think it would really take that much. I mean, we have a conservative majority in the Supreme Court. If Texas were to get their bill a Supreme Court case and enough people in there would be on their side, then yeah, Texas would effectively be the first state to ban abortion, and then many other state legislators with Republican minorities would be able to follow suit. I mean,
Think
like I
about it. I
mentioned
mean,
earlier, we already have Ron DeSantis trying to push a similar bill here in Florida.
think about it, though. You had in 2017, 2018, Republicans controlled the White House, the Senate, and the House, and the Supreme Court. Nothing
Yeah.
happened. It's not going to happen. And if it goes to the Supreme Court, they're going to strike it down. It's not going to last. Nobody really wants it. It's again, it's the last gasp of the dying old religious right. That's all it is.
Abortion is part of the Republican platform.
It's
Or being
if you
against
notice,
abortion.
if you watch most Republicans today, they do the very best they can to not have to talk about it. Trump went out of his way to not have to talk about it. It's the lip service you have to give to the religious right, but it's fading away. And in the next decade, the debate's going to go away completely. Not completely, there'll be little fringes here and there, but nobody wants to make abortion illegal, really. It's not going to happen. The Texas law is not going to hold up, and it's just not going to happen. My opinion. I mean, I hope I'm right.
We
I
shall
don't think-
see.
you know, I don't
We
it
shall
holding up.
see. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Sorry, I'm like looking into something real quick. I'm looking at the Republican platform right now.
I know it's there. Look, I know it's there because it has to be. You know, like they have to talk about God, they have to talk about the Bible because they just have to. But it's again that's fading away. The fact that in 2018, Republicans called the House and the Senate and Donald Trump and the Supreme Court, and it still didn't happen, just goes to show you it's not going to happen. And I think the GOP is going to evolve in the next decade, and it's going to take a more moderate stance. I think it's going to change, and you're going to start seeing more, the whole socially liberal, fiscal conservative types. I think that's going to be the new face. And the religious right, the anti-abortion, the anti-gay, that stuff is fading away. It's dying out, and it's not coming back.
We shall see, my friend. Okay, but but the reason I bring that up in general is because legislation like that is out in the open. It's big discourse. There's a lot of people defending it. Ron DeSantis wants to repeat it. Meanwhile, I really don't know any bill in America, like major piece of legislation that's like specifically trying to take rights away from men or hold men back, or where women are the dominant force or controlling any legislature anywhere in this country.
No, and I would agree with the abortion bill 100%. I would be against it 100%.
Yeah, but like the point being, there's nothing like that at that scale for men.
Well, again, I'm not against the principle of feminism, and I don't deny that women's issues exist, and I don't deny that misogyny exists, and I don't deny that a feminism movement, that feminists are necessary, and that women's rights are, yeah, absolutely under attack. And that's kind of the misconception that people have, that MRAs would be against the idea of feminism or against the idea of mentioning women's rights. We're not. All we're saying is, look, at the same time, while those things are valid, there are some men's issues that we want to talk about. We don't want to make it a contest. This is not Monday Night Football. This is not about who can run up the scoreboard. We're just saying these men's issues happen to exist, and we want to address them. Are men oppressed or not? The term oppression is so abstract. You could twist it so many different ways. Are women's rights under attack in many places in the country? Yeah, that's perfectly valid. I wouldn't deny that, and I wouldn't oppose a feminist fighting against that abortion bill. I would agree with them. I would support them on that.
Just so you know, I know you didn't have much time, Blue Orange, but we do have someone else waiting in the wings. take over. So I know this
Oh,
was
okay.
highly impromptu. Um,
I was getting a little tired myself, so
okay.
that's fine.
All right.
But this was great. I mean, like this.
Yeah. And maybe we can do this at some point where it's, where you both have time to prepare. I know Nathan was just kind of doing this on the fly. But yeah.
I like the casual fireside chats, though. They're fun.
Okay. Yeah. That's great. But okay, so I want to give you an outro, Blue Orange. Give yourself an outro. Tell people where they can find you. If you have a link, give it to me. I'll put it in my Twitch chat, so people can find you wherever you want, either your Discord or multiple links, even if you want. That's fine.
Well, first of all, anyone watching this is invited to the Discord. We are the semi-official Discord of the men's rights subreddit. We have a weekly Friday chat, which we stream to YouTube, which covers all kinds of topics. The early ones were a little painful, but we're kind of getting our stride now, and we're kind of getting something going, and it's pretty cool. I'm just Blue Orange 22 on YouTube. If you Google it or YouTube it, it'll pop right up. And yeah, this was fun. I like this. This was great. This was better than Sam Sater, I gotta say. And also, let me just say to Sam and to Emma, Nomi, but Sam and Emma, you guys are welcome on my channel anytime. And if you want to have me back, that's fine. Sam did say he wanted to come on my show. Well, not really a show. I mean, 100 people's not really enough to be a show. But Sam and or Emma, you guys are welcome on my channel anytime. You have my email.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I am too small for them to notice, but anyway, I do appreciate your kindness, and yeah, next time we do this, it'll be right. Okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you have a good one, Blue Orange.
Awesome. Go Canes.
Bye bye.